Welcome to Wexpressions. I'm Deirdre McGarry, the founder and co-editor of Wexford Women Writing Undercover. We're about to publish our second edition in September after a hugely successful launch of the first in March. I want to thank, first of all, the Wexford Literary Festival for allowing us this opportunity to record some fabulous Wexford women's writing. I want to thank Red Books for running with the idea of Wexford Women Writing Undercover. And I want to thank all of the women who got behind it. And especially today, I want to thank all of the women that you're going to hear who put themselves on the line and are taking part in this recording. We're very lucky today to have the full editorial team with us, and I'll introduce them shortly. Rachel looks after our illustration and text side, and Grace and Ellen are helping with the word side, and they'll both be reading more later. I'm going to be your host today for this collective of Wexford Women Writing. All of us who are here are living in the town or the county of Wexford. And as you'll see as the recording goes along, we're a great mix of young and matured, highly successful and just taking off writers. The important thing is that we're a really vibrant mix of women who are doing it ourselves. I'm a poet essentially, a part-time painter, a Christian, a political activist for Sinn Féin in a United Ireland, and I'm the co-founder and chair of the Frederick Douglass Civil Rights Festival. And I think as I introduce each of our writers, you'll discover what a huge mix of talent and enthusiasm and interest there is in the world for all of these women. I've edited several books of poetry in the UK and collaborated with other poets and artists in several publications. And I'm currently working on a solo collection called Between Husbands, but that's a story for another time. And a collaboration with a local artist, Pippi Furman, called Light Alchemy, soon to be published by Red Books. At this stage, I'm going to introduce to Rachel Druitt. Rachel got on board with the first edition of the magazine, and I'm very glad to say that she's decided to stay on board. And it's wonderful to work with someone who's quite opposite in lots of ways. This is what Rachel says about herself. Rachel Druitt is an artist illustrator, a solo parent, an eccentric expat Essexer, and she co-edits and helps illustrate Wexford Women Writing Undercover. She's currently producing a children's book for a wonderful nature charity. She's a Jill of all trades. She tries to work out how to do most anything. She says if her brain power could be properly harnessed, her house might even be deemed habitable. Perhaps the natural flora of her home is the source of her creativity and imagination. I think you can see a fabulous painting behind Rachel, one of her own, and I gather it's for the charity. Is there anything you'd like to say, Rachel? I know you don't like being hugely involved in the publicity wordy bit.
There's not much to add except to say thank you again for this platform to share some of our local talented and very diverse creatives. It's a great opportunity, so thank you.
What about this? You're planning an art launch to run alongside the launch of the next magazine?
I am, yeah. I'm trying to organise an exhibition for the people that are doing the illustrations for inside, and the cover artist as well. So yeah, that's in the pipeline.
So that's something to look out for.
Yeah. So that will be alongside it in September.
Thanks, Rachel. That's lovely. I'm going to introduce our first reader, who is A.M. Cousins. I'm going to call her Anne. Anne says in her biography that she lives in Wexford town. Her poems can be found in various journals, including Poetry Ireland Review, The Stinging Fly, The Best New British and Irish Poets 2015 and 2017, and online in poethead.wordpress.com. She also writes memoir and local history essays for Sunday Miscellany on RTE Radio 1. Her first collection of poetry, Redress, was published by Revival Press in 2021. And I know for a fact that book is available in Red Books, as well as some other locations in Wexford. So welcome, Anne. And I haven't heard what any of these readers are going to perform tonight, so I'm going to sit back and enjoy with the rest of you, I hope. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Deirdre, for the lovely introduction, and thank you to the Wexford Literary Festival for giving me the opportunity to read. I'm reading from the book Redress, kind of, there it is, purpley cover. And I was born and raised in Kilmore, and today is my parents were married 64 years ago today at 7:45 in the morning, because 64 years ago people got up early in the morning and got married nice and early. And the two poems I'm going to read this evening are about my parents, because I'm their eldest, so I was there in the very beginning, almost in the beginning. And the first one, they're both set in Kilmore, so the first one is Cowhouse. In the beginning, they had one cow, a tough little heifer that could kick like a mule. She says she used to park my pram at the cowhouse door while he taught her how to strip the milk from the teats until it squirted, rattling a tune on the sides of the bucket. As the herd grew to an assembly of docile, big-boned Frisians, the temperamental roan and a grey cow that was almost blue, I was deployed to the kitchen to supervise the others who had arrived stealthily, unbidden, to yoke my young shoulders. Once I left my post and slipped outside to stand covert at the cowhouse door, just close enough to smell the warmth of beasts and dung, and watch them go about their work in the sanctuary of one frugal, low-watt light bulb. My mother's voice was girlish, regaling family news and gossip, and he sang for her. My feet are here on Broadway. And when they laughed together like I had never heard before, my little heart was pierced with a yearning that can still ambush and desolate. And the second poem is years later. My parents had this lovely habit when we visited them at night when they were quite old. They would come out to see you off in the yard. My mother is still alive. My father passed away in 2017. So this was around when he was well into his 80s, and they would both come and stand at the door and look up at the sky, and then he would do the forecast. So he would have watched the forecast on television, and then he'd come out and he'd do his own, and he would either agree or disagree strongly with what the weather forecaster had said. So this is about, you're getting into the car and you put on the lights and you look back and the two of them are standing there in the door looking up at the sky. Conspiracy. In later years, when her memory failed, my mother remembered the Apollo voyages, but borrowed the eccentric fancy that they had never happened. A conspiracy of men playing God, flying in his face, inviting brimstone and retribution on our heads. So on Saturday nights when they stepped into the yard to wave me home, and he turned off the lights, the better to check the moon, the stars, and to forecast a week's worth of weather, they stood together on the gravel, and he pointed out the satellite, and she wondered where this all would end. So thank you very much, Deirdre and the Wexford Literary Festival, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. That's wonderful. You got us off to a great start. Thank you. So my next reader is Mary O'Brien. I've known Mary for some years now because we're in a poetry group together called the Front Room Poets, and I'm delighted that she's accepted this invitation. So welcome, Mary. Mary's biography says, I'm sure she's a person who's well known to many people in Wexford. She writes in both Irish and English. Her work has been published in many journals, and she has published 6 collections of poetry, the most recent being in Irish from Cushkeem, I hope I said that right, Dublin in 2019. She won the Irish Language Poetry Prize at Listowel Writers' Week in 2017, and she's been a reader at Strokestown Poetry Festival in 2019 and 2020. A short story reached the broadcast shortlist for the RTE Francis McManus competition. Mary is originally from Kilmuckridge and she now lives near Wexford Town. You're most welcome, Mary, and thank you for taking part.
Thanks very much, Deirdre, and thanks to the Literary Festival as well. It's nice to be involved. Thank you. So I've been writing in Irish maybe for the last 3 or 4 years mostly. So I'll read a poem in Irish and I'll explain first of all what it is. It's when I started to write in Irish, I was interested in the fact that there are so many Irish words thrown into our English language, especially where I was reared and where I was brought up in Kilmuckridge. And one word that I would never have heard, I suppose, when I was growing up was the word heron for the bird. It would always have been the corisk. And my grandmother lived with us, and so she would point out to us that to come and look out to the window to see the corisk out there. It would be out there usually in the bog on one leg, and so the idea was that she reminded me of something like the language as well, being kind of on one leg and then hidden, kind of fuichelt. So fuichelt. Heron ishahe adertu, ikshina mera le tevel and the hawan. Rihin shelum gur anam e sin nor chulas riv lehinta na hoige san yeskert. Come quick, see the corisk, a gleach my hiano waher. Rihimish, fekant, trid an vinok chul, amak an risk, mar a meek shi ag fara goharach im ask lochra. Vi shi an kart galore an chorisk, owl an tanga lachosh, fui kelt biognak. She was there right enough, the corisk, much like the old language. On one leg, hidden, almost. And the next one, I suppose, think Vinegar Hill over looking in a Scorthy, think 1798, the rebellion, and vinegar from the Irish Fi the wood of the berries, and a few. It's near solstice time, I think now. Probably Monday, is it? I think maybe is summer solstice. So some years ago, I went with a friend of mine up Vinegar Hill on the evening of the solstice to just to celebrate mark the occasion. So Vinegar Hill. Late June evening on Vinegar Hill, we sit in vigil, quietly attending to the slow passing of the longest day. And a Scorthy down below is a glamour pool of yellow streetlight, the black stairs rising high behind against a blue and pinkish sky. All around those little nests of light are villages, and the hills become more distant, more difficult to make out, as we strain to name them. There's Owlert, Carrigrue, Slieve Gui. To the west, the mountain peaks, Mount Leinster, Blackstair, White Mountain. To the south, the wooded hills, Slieve Cuilta, Carrickburn, Bree Hill and Forth. Below us on the slope, a hidden smoulder beneath firs and bracken, where smoke wafts fitful on a gentle breeze. Is this the butt end of an old campfire, a remnant of the red coat torchings, or maybe to the memory of some forgotten rebel, an eternal flame? Liberty, equality, fraternity, the high ideals that fired, possessed, and duped them to imagine victory on this sweet hill of berries, now renamed for bitterness, for the gall of their defeat. And suddenly it has grown cold. The light is well and truly gone. And once again, our vision makes a fool of us as we decipher shapes of things not there at all, or at least not possible for now. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. It gives such a lovely extra dimension to have the Irish language involved in any event, and particularly in our event. Thank you for that. Our next reader is Maybelle Wallace. Maybelle is a writer of historical fiction who last year entered the Wexford Literary Festival Meet the Publisher competition. And as a result, her debut novel, Heart of Cruelty, was published by Poolbeg. She also works as a paediatrician at Wexford General Hospital. You're most welcome, Maybelle, and congratulations on that terrific achievement. And let's hope that that novel leads to a second and a third and however much else comes after. But well done. I know that you're a member of the Write Club at Red Books. Yep. So it's just very encouraging to people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're a great an inspiration and an encouragement, and you're a busy woman.
Thank you.
As a paediatrician. So
yeah, I guess so.
It's a challenge for lots of women, isn't it, to squeeze their writing in. So I'm always in admiration with stories like yours, Maybelle. You're most welcome. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I'd really like to thank Wexford Literary Festival for involving me today, and also especially Carol Long as well for giving me my publishing break last year with Poolbeg. Yeah, I'm now working on the sequel to Heart of Cruelty, rather slowly, just really kind of 3 paragraphs a morning at the moment before work, but you know, 3 paragraphs is better than no paragraphs. And so yeah, for tonight, as a historical writer, I suppose I'm keenly aware of the rich historical heritage of Wexford, and so this piece is about an event which was pivotal in the course of Ireland's history, titled The Vengeance of Leinster, and it takes place beside the River Barrow near what will one day be New Ross in the year 1167, 2 years before the Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland is to begin. Under a grey sky, the river is still. Swallows swoop low across the water. The tide has risen and it's time to leave Leinster. The River Barrow will bear us to the sea. The path runs beside the silver sallies along the riverbank, where green rushes and water hemlock are crushed into the mud. The boats are loaded with what wealth remains to us, with the few of our people that are faithful. The oarsmen wait ready. How is it that I, more Queen of Leinster, have lost my home? We fled from Ferns at the last moment, Dermot, my husband, howling like a demon that he would defend his kingdom to the death, even against the O'Rourke with 300 men, even as the fires grew up along the road from Carlow. I told Dermot 100 times to pay the fine and return the O'Rourke's cattle, but he would not listen. He argued, It was 15 years ago, he said. He had not stolen the O'Rourke's wife, he said. She had come to him of her own will and had years ago departed to Clonmacnoise. Had I ever set eyes on her? No. As for her cattle, for sure, the O'Rourke had cattle enough, and in any case, our enemies would never be satisfied. Just pay them, I pleaded. Be humble and make your peace with God. But he would not. Now the O'Connor is anointed High King of Ireland on the hill of Tara, and the kings of Breffni, Meath and Ulster, and the Vikings of Dublin have sworn allegiance. Even Dermot's own people can support him no longer. So I must grieve for a place forever gone, our house at Ferns, the hallowed walls of St. Mary's Abbey, the green fields that run down to the curve of the River Bann, and the trees that shade the trout pools. Dermot grieves too, but with fury. He lingers, looking back, muttering into his red beard of the mountains of Leinster, the people of Leinster, the kingdom of Leinster. Water soaks my boots. I fold my cloak over Connor's little shoulders. And Aoife, my daughter, her eyes are stung by tears. She turns back too. Across the river, a bank of yellow iris blooms at the edge of the woods. The trees sway in the wind. Dermot shakes his fist at them, cursing O'Rourke and wishing that Leinster may bring him death. His heavy hand comes to rest on Aoife's shoulder, both hearts full of revenge. I remember that big hand swinging his sword as he taught her to fight. He would make her lift it with both hands as Connor watched. See that, Dermot would say, always trying to get Connor to take an interest. What's your sister? Aoife's a strong girl, harder than the men, and braids her hair with iron. But my sweet Connor is his mother's son and loves his gospels. It is time to embark. I go to Dermot's side. The tide will not wait for him, but he resists me. You should pay then, I say again. Pay? He says he will not spare a single coin. I will pay for an army. I will go to England. I will go to Normandy. I will go to King Henry, and I will come back in strength. I am the rightful king of Leinster. And I reply, our house and our camp are burned by O'Rourke. Your own people have turned against you. You're the king of nowhere. To what can we return? He says that I will have a new house built of white bone. I will have the whole of Ireland watered by the blood of the O'Rourkes and the O'Connors and the Vikings of Dublin. And he will have his revenge. He will be buried in his own abbey. The fires of destruction still burn in his voice. No good will come of it. The abbey is God's, I tell him. It is for the Augustinians. God will not receive you with your heart so full of fury. I built it, he says, and I will be buried in it. Aoife has her father's red hair. Her face is red with his hate. I tell her that centuries of bitterness will be the legacy of her children. She will not listen. She thinks her mother is an old woman, unfit to stand beside her. Revenge is all they want.
Wow, I was right in there, Mabel.
So
I was captivated. I don't know about the rest of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad you liked it.
I think
Thank you
Anne
for
has
having
said, what a vivid snapshot into a very interesting time.
The history is just amazing. Honestly, it's like Game of Thrones.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm glad that Poolbeg discovered you.
Thank you. Thank you again to the festival.
So our next reader is Margaret Galvin. Welcome, Margaret. You there? Yep. Margaret says that she's lived in Wexford all her adult life, where she worked variously with the library service, as the editor of Ireland's Own, and in social care. She's been writing and publishing poetry for over 30 years. She has recently edited a collection of poetry and prose by 48 writers from her native Tipperary. This anthology, Around Each Bend, was funded by the Arts Office of Tipperary County Council. She has a major interest in writing for self-understanding and identity, and frequently facilitates workshops on this theme. You're most welcome, Margaret. I'm very lucky to have recently got to know you a bit better than just the name, which I think a lot of people know in Wexford. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got for us tonight. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Deirdre. And like all my fellow participants, I'm delighted to be included in this lovely reading. And thanks to all involved for making it possible. Well, my first poem is about my favourite place in Wexford, which is Carcar and the Carcar cottages. And when I first came here nearly 40 years ago, I used to, as a very young girl, imagine that I would one day live there. But that didn't happen. But I still walk by there, I suppose, looking for an alter ego that I think is there. Carcar, Wexford. A chalky terrace of whitewashed walls, where people knot their curtains to admit the light, hang wind chimes and sun catchers, keep the clapped out washing machine in the garden, a doss house for the stray cat. A bright stagger of a place, where doors are painted gorse yellow, teal, brick red, where a chipped unicorn prances amongst cobwebs, and a jester brought back from some long ago trip flashes his gap-toothed smile and winks his cracked eyelid at passers-by. So I think the jester often winks at me passing by. So next up, a poem I have dedicated to the great Wexford artist Kevin Lewis, because Kevin pointed out this story to me in a journal. I think it was probably the Old Wexford Society journal at some stage. And apparently, long ago in Mulgannon, Wexford, in a place up there that was known as Cornick's Bower, there was a whole lot of revelry and shenanigans and gaiety and dancing and lighting of fires used to go on there at St. John's Eve. And that was until the fire and brimstone redemptorist preachers hit Wexford and put a stop to their gallop. And it's called Playing with Fire, for Kevin Lewis. It was the redemptorist preachers who put a stop to the John's Eve revelry in Cornick's Bower, Mulgannon, where the girls danced clockwise around the bonfire and the lads in the devil's direction, until the blaze burned low enough for them to whirl and flash through flames, claim some shy girl from Magdalen Town or Slippery Green. These local lads, scorched red by hot embers, were fire gods from Ram Street, purified by flame in a midsummer frenzy of singe and smoulder. Their girls were bedlam giddy, besotted and heathen, as if they'd never see a poor day, coaxing the ashes to a spark in a damp cottage in Duke's Lane, the walls weeping, a chalky mottle of tears. So that was the goings on up in Mulgannon. Now we move out of town a little bit for my last Wexford poem, out to Ardcavan. And at the turn of the road there, as you go down to the bird sanctuary, there's a very, very old graveyard. And in that graveyard lives a colony of feral cats, beautifully looked after by Bridget Collin and the great people of the WSPCA. And we have adopted a rescue cat from a similar location. And some nights I think maybe he wants to go back to Ardcavan to consort with the wildies out there. It's called Feral. A feral cat rescued from a colony, camping out in the disused cemetery at Ardcavan. His is a graveyard-coloured coat in shades of ashes, dust and clay. Domesticated now and fond of his creature comforts, his jade eyes slow blink an affectionate smoulder. He slinks silk around my ankles and purrs his old knave seduction. But nights when you wouldn't put a cat out, he claws at the door. Something in him wants to rough it under toppled headstones, connive in the dark with his old cronies, Moses Redmond and Humphrey Murphy, 300 years dead, their names faded in lichen and granite. So thank you all very much for this opportunity.
It's wonderful, wonderful, Margaret. And as you know, I live opposite those wonderful cottages at Carker, and they are captivating and different every day with the light. The whitewash kind of changes as the sun hits it, you know, so you get shades of pink and
absorbs the colour beautifully. Yeah, certainly.
They're beautiful row of cottages. And I haven't seen the cats at Ardcavan. It's my favourite beach, Ardcavan.
Oh, you go into the graveyard, Deirdre. Call 1 and 10 will come.
Okay.
Yeah.
or maybe I shouldn't. But thank you so much. We're on to Caroline now. Caroline Stevens-Taylor. Caroline, you're most welcome. Caroline says in her biography, "In my spare time, I like to take photos, paint and write. I write a blog about everyday things called itsjustnoteasy.com. And I've had some poetry and prose published in the Wexford Bohemian, Wexford Women Writing Undercover, the Galway Review, and a publication in Limerick called Magical Moments. I also contributed to the Wexford Stories, a community project celebrating the people and places of Wexford. I have a book of poems which I also hope to publish this year. I love people watching and walking around and exploring our lovely county here in Wexford." And I know too that you're a member of the Write Club at Red Books, Caroline.
That's right, yes, I am.
Which seems to be a powerhouse of support and good writing.
Fantastic, yeah. I think that's what's given me the courage to even try to submit anything, was joining Red Books.
Yes, so over to you, and
right,
welcome.
Well, thanks very much. Well, today I haven't written any poems, and today I'm talking about my experience of living in the village that I live in and about moving. I'm starting with a quote from Anais Nin, which says, "We travel, some of us forever, to seek other states, other lives, or other souls." Like I said, I moved to this village. I'm about to leave this village, actually, but I first moved back here 23 years ago. But first of all, I moved when I was 14. And when I left at 19, I said, not for £1 million a week would I live there again. So I'd first moved to the Balloch in 1979 when I was 14 years old. Having come from a fairly large city in the UK, it was a complete culture shock to me, leaving the hustle and bustle of city life for the deafening quiet of country living. The Balloch was a very sleepy village back then, with a shop which also had a bar attached to it, and outside a petrol pump if you needed to fill your car. There was another pub down the road, a post office, a church and a national school, with a bit of a rundown community centre with very little activity. Outside the post office was the iconic green and cream public phone box, and it was my link to the outside world, out beyond the Balloch. There was no bus service except for the secondary school bus, which passed through twice a day, once to take you to school and once to bring you home again. Back then, I felt totally trapped, as the only way to get anywhere was to stick out your thumb. And this was a complete no-no in the city. But here in the Balloch, it was not only acceptable, but an encouraged part of everyday life. I would love it when I went into Wexford town, a mere 20 minutes away. There was more life there down along the main street and the quayfront, and the view looking out across the water filled me with joy. There were people, lots of them there, just milling around doing ordinary things and shopping, browsing, and crowds of kids hanging out. There was a good vibe about town, and I longed to be part of that. Now, and in the last 23 years, this little village has expanded somewhat with new houses, a couple of new housing estates. Post office is completely renovated and has a much needed supermarket, but alas, the iconic phone box has gone. The shop and bar has also been extended, well, the pub part anyway, because now we have gained a function room, but we lost the petrol pump. Back in the day, if it was a function room you were after, then it was the Unyoke down the road that everyone from all over flocked to. Now that was a great place, and at the time it was my saviour, because every weekend I got to go there and enjoy the hustle and bustle again, dance to the local bands such as Trees and the Stars, or indeed the big bands like Joe Durnall and the Wolf Tones. Now it hosts the local car boot sale. The Ballock may be known more specifically for its GAA than anything, and it has produced some great hurling and camogie players over the years, even winning the All-Ireland back in 1996, the year before I moved back here. Its full title, of course, being Owl at the Ballock, as our two half parishes make a whole. This village is more than GAA, however. It has a good community spirit. The new improved community centre has many uses, from running a boxing club, a youth club, active retirement group and preschool, to name but a few. We have a lovely forest walk just out the village at Kilbride and another up Ballyboy Hill. We have cool named roads to walk, such as the Fairy Lane and Teapot Lane. But do not dare to walk the Fairy Lane past midnight, or you will be sure to be stuck there till sunrise. Other than that, you can enjoy the Fairy Lane walk to the village and back and have your steps for the day covered. Before COVID put a halt to our annual field day that would be held in the grounds of the school, and it was always a winner and a great day to be had by all, young and old, and the whole community would come together and donate, participate and confabulate. The many fundraisers held by the local people, giving up and dedicating their time freely to help other further desperately needed projects like improving the church, the community centre, the GAA, or helping those that are sick. We have builders, carpenters, hairdressers, beauty therapists and bakers, to name but a few of the tradesmen and craftsmen that goes on here. We have a community Facebook page to ask, advise and advertise anything and everything you wish. The two pubs, Bob's Bar and the Sawdust Inn, both family friendly and welcoming. And not only can you get a good cade meal of vulture there, you can eat, drink and be merry, dance the night away to the varied entertainment they put on. And you can do so in the knowledge that at the end of the night, if you're stuck for a lift, the owners are only too happy to oblige. As much as I didn't like living in this village when I was a 14-year-old blowing, and I swore I would never live there again, I'm glad that I did, with a renewed appreciation for country living. I raised my family here and was happy to do so. But now I guess I am seeking another life and meet new souls, perhaps in a new state, and maybe a bit more hustle and bustle. It just feels like my time here has come to a natural end, with the end of raising my children going off and doing their own discoveries. But I hope the family that has bought my house not only appreciate the house, but the village that it's in and all it has to offer. Thank you.
That was a beautiful portrait and quite captivating. I've never been to the Ballock. But,
no, I thought I'd like to promote it. It gives a different perspective from a 14-year-old's viewpoint.
Absolutely.
Blowing into somebody much older.
Absolutely. Now I'd like to go and find out where it is and what it is. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you.
My next reader is Ellen Lorden Loye. Ellen, joined us on our team to produce the second edition of Wexford Women Writing Undercover. And delighted to have you on board, Ellen. It's wonderful. I got to know you as a member of the Front Room Poetry Group, and it's going to be fun working with you.
Yes, happy to do it.
Ellen says about herself that she's originally from County Limerick. She settled in Wexford in 2004 after spending many years living in Paris. She's a mother of two and a teacher of English and French. As well as writing, she loves gardening and finds inspiration in nature. And I can tell you that from the day that Ellen arrived at the poetry group, she was writing just beautiful, polished poetry. And I know that you threw yourself into the writing scene wholeheartedly. And you always bring us tales of festivals and master classes that you've attended. And it's lovely to hear about them. And it's great that you've got that huge enthusiasm. So you're most welcome.
Thank you.
Handing over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Deirdre. I'm delighted to be involved this evening, and I am proud and chuffed to be involved with the Wexford Women Writing Undercover second edition. Looking forward to getting stuck in there any day now. Yeah, as you said, I'm originally from County Limerick, and my first poem is actually based in County Limerick, where I grew up. I grew up in a tiny village called Drumculliher, and near Drumculliher there is a bog. And every summer, my father, like all of our neighbours, would pay to harvest some of the turf from the bog. So I suppose back in the day, the turf would be cut by hand. But when I was a teenager, and this is when the poem is set, a big machine would go in and cut the turf and leave it in rows. So then it was up to us to go into the bog and to stand the turf up, and it was kind of like a tent shape. You would put two sods of turf together like that, and then two more like that, so that the air would go through and aerate them. And you'd have to come back maybe a week later and turn it around. And once it was fully dried out, you could then take it home in trailers. So as a teenager, 14, 15, 16, every summer for a few weeks, weather permitting, I would help my father and sometimes my mother as well to foot the turf. There were 4 girls in the family, and I was the only one really who was roped in to do it. The rest of them would complain and give out and invariably find other things to do. So it's about footing the turf as a teenager. It's called footing. We footed turf together, bonding over back-breaking work, building reeks, building bridges. No need for talk. Moving up the lines, keeping our own peace, feeling early morning mist burning off our curved backs. Another scorcher. Ah, she's boiling rain. Irked at his pessimism, too young for his wisdom, cursing at falling sods. Stopping for tea and ham sandwiches, he made sure I got the cup lid of the flask, the one with the handle, while he took the inner cap. Leaning back against his old red car, enjoying the sun on our faces, both brown as berries, both deep as the bog itself. Batting the breeze, keeping it light, like the gentle sway of bog cotton. Setting to once more, attacking a new line of black lingots, stacking them 4 by 4, a reservation of tiny teepees, treasure in our hands. Sweat trickling down our backs on hot summer afternoons in anticipation of cold winter evenings. Then running for the car as a thunder shower showed up, just like he said it would. Having a quiet smoke together, listening to the staccato on the roof. Too loud for talk anyway. Back out to the rows of peat, feeling tired and stiff, but pushing on, trying to match his strength. Wanting him to call it a day, yet never letting on. Breathing a sigh of relief at the shout, "Let's head for home." A quick wash of the hands in a convenient puddle. Aches and pains all over. Vowing to myself never to come again. Forgotten 2 minutes later when he says, "A great day's work. Fair play to you." And that was from my dad. Moving now to another place that is very close to my heart. I spent 13 years living in Paris, but my ex-husband's family was from Brittany, from a tiny, tiny village in Brittany called Prisiac. And we spent every summer there, and it, as I say, holds a dear place in my heart. It's a very short poem, but hopefully you'll get a feel of this tiny Breton village in the summertime, in the hot summers of Brittany. Prisiac, sleepy Breton village, mid-July, late afternoon, clack of boules, sheer white voile, shutters ajar, sweaty, sticky heat, siesta sheets, rooster's raucous call, spellbreaker, arms stretch, sweet baby breath. I'm taking you to Venice now. So we're going from Limerick to Brittany to Venice. This was inspired by a pair of shoes, a black sparkly pair of runners I bought in Venice on a little holiday a few years back. Venice. Shod in Venice, skipping over bridges, sipping bubbles, speaking in sighs, feet cushioned in stars, never touching ground, twinkling in shadows, tapping to mute music. Faces exposed in masks, liberated under captivity. Veils that reveal hidden desires. Draped in black velvet over white lace, dancing on cobbles, perpetuating the masquerade. Join the procession, reveling in the streets, laughing and loving the carnival of life. Finally, a tiny, tiny, tiny one. My son, Alex, my eldest son, went to Montreal on the Erasmus scheme in his second year in college, and it was the longest time I'd ever been without him. It was 4 months, and it was very hard. And I wrote this tiny, tiny poem. It's only 5 lines, so Montreal on my mind. No fancy words, no clever rhymes, just something heard 1,000,000 times. I love you. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. We've been swept back into history with Nabel, and now you've taken us on the holidays that we're all craving during COVID. Real evocation of places that perhaps most of us, giving us little images and shots of vision that just bring a place alive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really lovely. Thank you. Now I'm going to introduce you to Grace. What a powerhouse Grace is. Grace has joined us for our second edition of Wexford Women Writing Undercover, and we're absolutely delighted to have her on board. She's bubbly and lovely, and she's such a busy person. Grace says about herself, she comes from Ireland, originally Bray in County Wicklow, now resides in Gorey. So we have a representative from the top end of the county here. You're welcome. She's been writing since the age of 8, when her teacher noticed her flair for creating writing and encouraged her. Writing is Grace's special place to go, and she finds writing extremely therapeutic. Poetry is usually her first go-to writing choice, but she writes an array of forms, from reviews and essays to blogs and short stories. She's a member of several writing groups, including Write Club in association with Red Books, the Writer's Pen, the Writer's Ink, and the Gorey Writers. She was longlisted in 2012 for the RTE Guide Penguin Ireland Short Story Competition. She's been published in some art and literary journals, including Space Inside, Bray Arts Journal, and she will be featured in the Wexford Bohemian and Wexford Women Writing Undercover in the near future. She's been published in several magazines, Irish Parent Magazine, You Magazine, and Woman's Way. There was a feature piece on Grace in her writings, along with her poems, in her local newspaper, the Gorey Echo, in 2012. She's also been part of 2 anthologies, Fledglings and Taken Flight, published with the Gorey Writers. She's performed her work at Bray Arts, and in February 2021, read on live Facebook with Red Books Wexford. She was part of a performance tribute to the late Lawrence Ferlinghetti, where she read a piece that she had written about his life and works. In April 2021, she had a poem published with the Galway Review, and in May, both another poem published by the Outpost Era and had a 20-word short story, that's short, published on Poetic Reveries on Instagram. She read some of her poetry on the Irish Bookshop Show in May on Facebook, and further publications are in the pipeline, where Grace has already had work accepted. Currently, she's working on other projects in progress, and she has accepted an offer to join the magazine team at Wexford Women Writing Undercover, as I told you. And she's also a book reviewer for Innis magazine, linked to Children's Books Ireland. She's got several blog sites. It's a bit silly of me to try and read out the names of them, but perhaps we can get them out there in some way along with this recording. There's no point in me reading them, so forgive me for that, Grace. But it's just great having you on board, and I'm going to hand over to you with whatever you're going to bring us tonight, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Deirdre, and thank you for this opportunity to read tonight, and it's lovely to meet everybody who I haven't met yet, and I'm delighted to be working with you guys on the Wexford Women Writing Undercover magazine. So I have just 2 poems here for you now. I hope you enjoy them. Wexford. I moved to Gorey 9 years ago with my husband and daughter and watched her to grow. Play school and primary all have been here, making her friends and facing some fears. Our little boy Ben was produced locally, now a family of 4 from a family of 3. We rescued a dog who is my other child, a child with 4 legs, a tail, and is wild. As I write this poem, her head's on my knee. She wants to go for a walk, you see, in the Ramsford Wood, which is near to us. So is the park, the town, and the bus. Ben likes his trains, and Liv gets travel sick. Not having a car, we have to choose and pick. Check the timetables and make a day out of a plan, but we are just grateful that we all can. And Escorthy has a castle which is historically cool, dressing as a Viking knight about to duel, climbing Vinegar Hill and making happy memories, watching the town sights from above the trees. Wexford town is like a magical lane. Harry Potter is a good way to explain, just like Diagonal Alley with the old-fashioned shops, cobblestone ground for horses' clip-clops. The sunny southeast is what Wexford is known, and as I type this, the sunshine has grown. A bead of sunlight hits the computer keypad, which reminds me of my dad. In Wexford's town, there is a cowboy restaurant. Bob's Ranch House has whatever you want. Locally produced food made with a twist, a delicious and fun place to eat and miss. Cowboy-clad staff in a saloon-style bar. Better make sure they don't shoot from afar. The cowboy out front is my dad's clone to a T, from his facial features and hair and his moustache, you see. The bull ring, a magical marketplace for sellers to show customers their special place, with treasures and antiques from years ago, to homemade crafts and delights to purchase and bestow. From the Opera House, Rosslare Harbour and Kilmore Quay, Wexford's full of culture, nature and history. Strawberries, cheese and various fish. Wexford has almost anything you wish. Sport and music and telling stories. Honey made by our bumblebees. Beaches breathtaking to walk and swim, finding beach treasures with friends and kin. Read books in Wexford, a book lover's dream. The Hungry Bear and Gory try their pancakes and cream. Court Town and Kiora and Tara Hill, Loftus Hall giving me an eerie chill. Rumour says Wexford's the most haunted county. On the Emerald Isle, Wexford is the most spooky. Purple for calm and yellow for fun, Wexford's colour for tranquil and colour for the sun. The other poem that I'm going to read is called Ice Cream, because you can't go to Wexford, the sunny southeast, without having a nice ice cream. Ice cream. Taking the honey waffle cone in my hand, it is wrapped in a red napkin. 3 huge giant scoops shine and sit. I walk and then sit on a nearby wall. The ice cream feels cold against my mouth. My lips and tongue tip numbed. My taste buds go into overdrive with luxury and indulgence. I can smell the vanilla sweetness, so can a hovering wasp buzzing loudly, busily, annoyingly close to my ear. I brush him away. I can taste the vanilla beans and milk from 2 dairies. The next scoop I eat is artificial, bubblegum. Why I picked that, I think it was because my 10 and 7-year-olds delight in that flavour, the chemicals nearly giving me a high now. Final scoop is my favourite one today. I close my eyes and indulge in this icy treat. Rum and raisin, just the right amount of booze and sugar. My taste buds are in ecstasy. I crunch and munch on the cone. When it is devoured, instead of feeling my usual guilt, I smile at the fact that I could indulge and enjoy it. No kids or anyone to share it with. I ate each mouthful myself, popping my napkin in the bin. I walked towards the sand to watch the waves. And that's it now. So I hope you enjoyed them. Again, thank you so much for that lovely opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. You took us on a tour and ended with a treat. That was lovely. Really captured Wexford. in all its glory. Thank you very much indeed, and we're delighted that you're joining us. Now I'm moving on to Sinead O'Reilly. I did mention at the beginning of our programme that we were young and more mature, and I think Sinead is the youngest member of our group. But wow, she's a rising star, and we're delighted that she's with us today. Welcome, Sinead. Sinead says about herself, and I had to get her to expand her biography a little bit because I knew some things about her. Sinead is 16. She is a writer and student at Loreto, Wexford. She is twice commended in the Foyle Young Poets of the Year Award, and she was selected to take part in the inaugural Edna O'Brien Young Writers Bursary. One of her poems was recently published in the Irish Times. During lockdown, she coordinated the Deep Roots Poetry Exchange, which brought together young writers to share stories and write a poem inspired by the story they were told. And the poems are published online and printed in a limited edition anthology. And I actually got mine from the Arts Centre, but perhaps Sinead will tell us where else they might be available. She's also a Narrative 4 ambassador on the youth panel of the Museum of Childhood Ireland, and she recently took part in the Irish National Session of the European Youth Parliament. Wow, I'm so impressed at 16, Sinead. But where are you going to go from here? You're most welcome. You actually just live around the corner from me. And I've run into you a couple of times with your dad. I had no idea that you were such a talented young lady. So it's wonderful to have you here on this performance. Thank you. Will you just tell us where those little anthologies are available before you read?
Of course, yeah. I think there should be still a few in the Arts Centre, and if not, I'm going to drop some more down. And I'm also hoping to drop some more into Red Books. So I'd say they're the two probably go-to places in Wexford Town. Yeah. So thank you for having me here, first of all. I've really enjoyed listening to everyone so far. And yeah, so I have a few poems here to read. I'll start with this one, which doesn't actually have a title at the moment. So I'm going to call it Lockdown Cycle for now. So Lockdown Cycle. I haven't done something for the first time in a long time. So I grab my bike from the shed, wrench my saddle an inch higher, swing my leg around and pedal off. Just out of reach of the ground, my feet circle. I wobble like a bird on the wire. Zipping between curb and tarmac drain line, I grip the handlebars with my thumb, fingers stretched to the brakes. Screeching resistance, slacken, then accelerate. Hedges ripple behind me. I pedal faster than my head spins, faster than the bending of speed around me. My roots rip back into something alive. I swerve onto the track by the river. Mud batters up, flooding my thighs. Up the levee, now level with sky and distant rooftops, I plunge with a bump that's nearly too much. I keep going. I pass 1,000 ideas for poems. I let them all go. My bike is a bike. I cycle. And just for a moment, somewhere between asphalt and blue, I am me and nothing else. So that was my first poem. And this next one is called Ode to the Milkman. Unseen, your footfalls float like early dew, a tipping fulcrum, capped in dawn to shore. The keeper of 100 blinking moons, deposited like lanterns at each door. You're silent as a backdrop to a dream, as wheel spokes glint, unroll Hemera's cloak. Your eyes alone behold her naked gleam, your hand unlocks the caged-in glassy notes. With heart sparks beating palm, you lace the cold. The cornerstone of morning, time endured. A memory, a silence not untold, for countless sleeping ears are reassured. At sunrise, picture bottles smashed in flight, as day spills round your feet, a pool of light. And this next poem it starts off in my kitchen sink and it travels to Kerry. So I think that just shows how even when we were stuck in our 5Ks during lockdown, like you can go anywhere through poetry. So I don't know where this came from, it just happened. It's called Potato Water. Gushing the sink from teeming spuds, the gold of Kerry bog water, where it flows to the sea in streams alive as buds, unfurling over each rock in tiny splashes, closing then and tumbling down to dredge the copper hue and spill it over the land, where sods of turf are piled in the sedge, and one field over, spuds will soon be dug. And this next poem is, I'm hopping all over Wexford here. This is, in my mind, it's in Westgate. I always ask writers if they prefer to write with other people or completely alone. I love writing in cafes, just kind of people watching. So this is Writer as Hummingbird. A cafe's top nook, I float on wavelengths of coffee, words upending words. My body wants to write itself. If my thoughts could bottleneck like the stream of people here, I could dip my beak in, swallow before they escape. They're already rushing away. I'm at the edge where everything begins. I sprout wings, I hover, hawk in the air. Buzz and blur, I scavenge. Each head tilt, coat thrown over a chair, an insect to glean. I pluck from bark, from webs of conversation. I beat and beat, molt feathers and drafts. Somewhere in this down-up stroke, there is a balance of diving harmonics I may or may not ever find. I dip my wing in the stream. A bowl-shaped prism spirals out like a fountain. Inside it, I'm colour co-evolving with myself. I think I have time for one more. This one's not too long anyway. This is 60% Water. Despite age passing as light through the years, your strength endures the hurtling from peers. Drop, splash, weightless hang. My legs belong to timeless art, and I admire them through stinging eyes. I must restart the clock. I thrust my arm above the wave crest, swelling, mirrored lung inside my chest. Like butterfly wings, bruises dance and dapple with each beat, as hands search seaweed, grapple slimy strands and grist of rock to find the rail. Displaced in new air, my feet are pale, a blank page painted by my veins, and I recall the pride when doctors couldn't find a drop to draw for my porcelain arm. Moulding never complete, I shriveled in perfection, dreaming of the sea. So that's my last poem. Thank you very much.
Beautiful, Sinead. I just think it's incredible what you're turning out at age 16, and it's just going to be such a delight watching you continue to write and continue to develop. It's been lovely that you've joined us today. Thank you. My next reader, another young lady, another amazing young lady, Alana Hamill. Alana says about herself, she is a 19-year-old student from Wexford, and her writing has appeared in several anthologies, newspapers and magazines. She's currently editing her debut novel. She's made several contributions to Red Book's weekly book show, including some fascinating interviews. I watched her interview Column to Bean, and was just amazed at how skillful and assured she was for such a young lady. And it's a delight to have her reading for us today. So thank you, Alana.
Hello, this is a poem I wrote called Is Poetry Pointless? I don't write poetry. I don't think I ever will. It's a rotary system, it's one aim to kill. I admit I did once overdose on Lowell's polyphonic prose. You don't see that lot nowadays with your Robert Frost or your Terence Hayes. They've all moved on to screenplays. If they do write, it's melodic phrase. What does pointless even mean, without a purpose or a meaning? Purpose in poetry is fairly drastic, although some people just want a book to read quick. I doubt most poetry would please the reader, unless you care for iambic pentameter. I can see the poet wave in its beater, easy to confuse with the grim reaper. Poets are killers, say it again, from your Rupi Kaur to your Dickinson. On rhythm the poet stabs to death. That's about as good as poets get. While the poet goes through the alphabet, thinking about their next sonnet. Being struck by lightning odds to 500,000 to 1, but this is easily increased by reading some John Donne. They say you are what you eat, well I say you are what you read. I learned that from a man with a degree in filioct, little did he know that his future'd be fucked. Writing poetry is pointless, I'm telling you now, and that's coming from someone who doesn't know how.
Thank you, Alana, that was wonderful. I'm just so excited at the fact that we've got young writers who are so accomplished, who are up and coming, and it's just lovely to have them both integrating with older writers, but also to, you know, listen to those fresh new voices. Finally, I'm going to read a poem of my own about a very favourite place of mine, Our Lady's Island. I think on the signposts it's now called Ladies Island, but originally it was called the Field of the Women, or the Field of the Women Priestesses. I think when I first came to Wexford, I really felt that this was a special place, and it seemed appropriate tonight with its original name as a gathering place for women to read this poem. Every time I go there, I have a different thought and a different sensation. And just recently, when the lockdown came to an end, the first opportunity that we had, we actually went and stayed in an Airbnb on the side of the lake for a little holiday after having been locked up for so long. So this one is called The Parable of Our Lady's Island. At the grotto on the island, the wooden Jesus had been vandalised and was missing a left forearm. The well was not fit to drink and had litter in its dank water where flies gathered. No 50-cent candles were lit. But his right hand was still outstretched and beckoned, and fresh rainwater was falling. A gusty breeze rippled the glittering surface of the lake. Wild swans glided near the edge and shifted on the banks. All around the calls of birds and the rich opera of the silence of wild places. It made me think how the gospel brought to those poor through exploitation had been disabled and polluted by powerful theologians to manipulate the hungry and thirsty, poor in spirit and poor on the earth. But this field of women, as it used to be called, gave me hope that no twisted teachings of clever men and dumbed down messages can hide the raw truth of the outstretched open hand of love incarnate, or the living water he offers, which comes like refreshing rain, or the Holy Spirit in the wind, which will blow as it wills, or birds on the wing, messengers in the sky, lit by bursting light, streaming through the dark clouds, or the honesty of the first gospel, the scripture of the natural world. So folks, that brings our session and our contribution to the Wexford Literature Festival to a close. Let me first of all say a huge thank you to all of the women who've just taken us on such wonderful journeys today. It's just been wonderful to be in all your company and to share your very intimate perceptions of history, geography. There's just so much there. So thank you. And please give each other a round of applause. Can I say finally that the Wexford Women Writing Undercover team welcome submissions to our anthology. The next edition is all the submissions are closed for our next edition, but look out for it. It's going to be available in September of this year. And look out too for when to start contributing to the third edition. I can tell you that undercoverwex@gmail.com is where to contact us for submission guidelines. That's undercoverwex@gmail.com. And the theme for our next edition is under pressure. And we welcome raw, honest, vulnerable women writing coming out from undercover. And we'll be delighted to receive your submissions. I think that's everything that I've got to say. Thank you. This has been a real delight to host and a delight to be in all your company. And thank you, Wexford Literature Festival, for this great opportunity. Thank you.